open it up from the standpoint of we're getting to that time of session where we're going to be obviously looking at the budget. I think you're going to see on our side next week, we're hopeful that we'll start rolling out some of our budgets with the line items so that we can start the process down the path. Obviously, I'm sure we'll talk about property taxes, any questions with those, but with that being said, I'll just kind of open it up and let you guys see where you want to go today.
Speaking of budget, there's a bill that would fund pediatric cancer research in the state. Is that something that your caucus is going to be supportive of? There's a committee meeting that's happening today. What do you think about that?
Obviously not making commitments on the budget at this point in time until we've got to that point, but I think you're going to see that bill move through the process, and there is a lot of support within the caucus. Also, just don't want to commit to anything yet until we see what all the pictures are going to look like amongst the parties, between the House, Senate, and the governor. But I think you'll see that bill continue to move forward.
The Iowa Health Initiative folks are here lobbying for the tobacco tax increase. As you're discussing the overall tax picture, is that still part of the conversation?
And I think, keep in mind, what happened earlier in the Senate that obviously didn't move forward, and so that's kind of been part of the conversation as well. We're just trying to be mindful of looking at what these tax increases mean to everyday Iowans as we make any decisions we would have when it comes to taxes. I would say from where I stand right now, it's probably less likely to move forward. But again, I don't know what the rest of the session is going to look like. And so making any commitment really one way or the other, probably premature for it, but obviously it hasn't had a lot of activity in either chamber, so I think that's probably as much of an update as I can give.
One of the things that Senator Clement had talked about kind of along the same lines was maybe looking at increasing the tax on the vapes and the pouches instead of like the tobacco products. Is that something that House Republicans have looked at all?
I'm aware of that. I've had a conversation with Senator Clemish about that. Look forward to, my expectation would be we'll be getting a bill on that, and at that point we'll make a decision on what that looks like. Whatever we would do on either of these topics, for example, or whether it was what Stephen asked about or what you're asking about now, we would need to make sure that that money is strictly used for Medicaid and what the future shortfall looks like for Medicaid. So if we're going to engage in those conversations, that's definitely where the starting point has to be. But on that, we look forward to seeing if there's a bill that comes over from the Senate. I'm aware that's something they want to do, and it would just obviously continue to go to that growth that we're seeing in Medicaid.
The CDL English proficiency bill passed. Why is the caucus supporting that?
Yeah, I think that there's just a lot of instances in what we've seen across, there was a debate yesterday as I was listening to it, saying that the feds have a certain level of standards, but they're not necessarily enforced. I think it's one of those issues as a state that we want to make sure we're having safe roads and safe drivers. And at the same time, the industry itself approached us about doing it because they don't want to have bad actors. If you look at what that bill did, it makes it enforceable. It's actually getting folks on the road. We can look at fines, but making sure that those folks aren't going to be on the road and not have the ability to continue on down Iowa's roadways, make sure that we're going to be safe and they're going to be proficient. I think we need to have a level of a standard here in the state, regardless of what the federal government has.
Can I get your reaction? I know you're focused on here, but President Trump's executive order yesterday on specifically and especially on mail-in voting and sort of restrictions on that. Do you have any reaction to that?
I haven't, to be honest, I haven't had the time yet to fully look into what that would mean on what our states would be. Obviously, it'll, just like many other of the executive orders that the president has had, probably work its way through the court process, and we'll see what the impacts will be. I think here in Iowa, we have some very strong, I would argue some of the strongest voter protection laws in the state to make sure that we're having, voter ID and making sure that ballots that are being sent through mail are having signatures and having the proper things in place. We feel we have very strong laws, but I haven't had the chance to fully dive into that yet and see what the impacts may be on Iowa.
Many times when the governor describes negotiations like on the budget or on taxes, income taxes, she says, the three of us sit down, Senate leader, you, she sit down and draw up what you agree on, what you don't agree on, and how to get to an agreement. What do you agree on at this point, the three pieces of this, House Republicans, Senate Republicans, and the governor?
For property taxes or the budget? Property taxes. I would say when it comes to the property tax, as far as where you're seeing a level of agreement, obviously, I don't think any of us want to negotiate it in public, but where I think you're seeing a level of agreement is obviously having something in there that has a cap. Now, there's a difference between the House, the Senate, and the governor when it comes to whether that has a CPI involved with it or not, a floating cap. We feel pretty strongly in the House it needs to be a set cap, whatever that's going to look like. You obviously see a way of providing relief, whether it's through freezes for certain classes. Our bill focuses on providing an exemption of up to $25,000 for all homesteads in the state of Iowa. So I think Another piece looking at the TIF, I'm not saying TIF's fully agreed to, but that wasn't in our original bill. The governor had it. The Senate has sent us a bill last year on that topic. That's why we included it, to try to find a place of compromise from something that the other two thought were important. So it's hard for me to sit here and say, here's what is agreed to, but I think generally we're trying to get to the same spot. Ultimately, I think the biggest part of this is that 2% cap is what will be the biggest impact on property taxpayers as we move forward to provide them certainty.
As we're beginning budget discussions, are there any top priorities for your caucus that you know will be included, such as parent educator payments?
Yeah, and before I would, without going into details, hopefully our goal would be to have all that stuff released, so it'd probably be a better conversation me that would have when it comes to specific pieces of the budget. Obviously, that's one of them that has been a priority, but I think you're going to see us, we've already passed our SSA number. We're also trying to make sure we're fully funding Medicaid. And as we roll those budgets out, probably next week, it's a good conversation for us to have about what some of those priorities look like. I haven't had the chance yet to fully sit down with every single budget chair, so I don't want to get out ahead of them. But I think, we're going to continue to pass a conservative budget that fully funds those priorities that we've laid out. But probably next week, I have a better look on that for you.
Can you walk through your rationale for raising the speed limit to 60 miles an hour?
Yeah, I think that as we took that into caucus today, and I think we've heard from a lot of Iowans, I think maybe even more so in rural Iowa, but from our constituents, this is, as long as I've been around here, there's always been that request of the legislature, and I think it maybe just is the perfect storm at this point in time to see just that slight increase and allowing jurisdictions to be able to go up to 60. When we had that conversation in caucus, there was pretty enthusiastic. It's been something that's been around for, forever. Really, since I've been here. So I think it was just to the point where it was a perfect storm this year.
Last month, the Center for Effective Lawmaking at Vanderbilt University came out with a report on legislative effectiveness, and they said, quote, "It is difficult to overstate the degree to which minority party lawmakers are shut out of the lawmaking process in Iowa," end quote. They looked at a 3-year period and they found only one bill sponsored by a Democrat became law. They said that's way out of line with their findings in other states. By my count, I think 5 bills sponsored by Democrats made it out of committee before the first funnel, but only one of them was brought to the floor. Can you talk about your thought process? Do you think it's right that basically any bill sponsored by a Democrat has almost no chance of getting out of this chamber?
Well, being one of the last members here that served in the minority for 4 years under Democrat leadership, I can tell you that the process was not a lot different than it is today. Here's what I would say ultimately is, those are decisions that have to be made at the committee level. I will also say, though, a perfect example of something we did this year that we worked on that we're still fighting for to try to make sure we get as part of our final negotiations through the MAHA bill is looking at screen time in school districts. That was something that the Democrats and the Republicans worked together on as one of our priority pieces, included a piece that I felt like was one of the things that they felt was extremely important. And I think if you've seen this session, we've accepted, I don't know what the count is, but we've accepted a lot of amendments that are offered, as long as they're reasonable amendments that try to make our piece of policy better. I think we've seen this session that we're just not outright saying no to them. But as far as what happens at the committee level, that's a decision that the committee has to make. But we've tried to, when there's opportunities for agreement, to work together.
What's the will of your caucus? Sorry.
No, go ahead. I'll come down.
Yesterday.
He told me he's gonna cut you off earlier. I wasn't gonna let him, but then he barged in.
Exactly. You don't need to have an Iowa flight off. Yesterday, the Senate rejected a House amendment to an immigration-related bill. The House had added Governor Reynolds' sort of immigration ordinance. How important is it to the House to keep the governor's immigration bill moving forward?
I've already had a conversation with the Senate. My expectation is we'll be able to resolve that issue, and we would like to continue to see that language that the governor proposed in that. I've already shared that with the Senate. I think at this point in time, we're in a place where I think we'll be able to find some resolution on it at probably leadership level.
Is it the will of your caucus that there needs to be some kind of grand agreement on eminent domain before the biggies like property tax and the budget? Will you hold out for that?
I don't think we're in a position. I've never thought it was good for us to link different pieces of legislation and say with absolutes we will do something or we won't do something. We've been very clear. We've probably over the last several years, I've answered more questions on this topic than almost any other topic in the legislature. We're still in a position, we would love to see something come from the Senate. Whether that happens or not, we can't control that. We're more than happy, and I'm going to keep giving you probably the same answer and probably not giving you anything really great to report that's new. We're more than happy to consider a compromise if it has protections for the landowners that we've been asking for in this conversation. Some of it has to be, can we find that level of agreement? And clearly at this point, we haven't been able to, but you know, the House is all ears. If there is something that anyone wants us to consider, we'll at least consider. That doesn't mean we'll do it, but we would just love to see a piece of policy for us to even negotiate about.
Well, to piggyback off Kay's question about property taxes, when the three of you are meeting every week, is that still an active conversation, or is it kind of pushed off to the side?
I mean, we've continued to have conversations at a leadership level. A lot of, a lot of our conversations have been around property taxes and probably will be moving forward, and the budget as well. A lot of those have been happening probably more of just a Senate House type of conversation, whether it's between committee chairs, myself and leadership over there. Those are probably more just management of between the rotunda more so than what at the leadership level we've been trying to find, because we recognize that we've been asking for a bill to come over here, and we're willing to look at compromises. So I'd say it's more at our level right now.
When you have those conversations on eminent domain specifically, are you seeing even incremental progress? Are you closing any gaps, or should I cancel my June vacation?
Where are you going?
I'm not gonna dox myself.
You're not gonna do. Well, thanks for the invitation. Did you hear that? We're all going on vacation. I'm not going to negotiate anything in public, Aaron. But from the standpoint of
just like progress, not like even specific.
Here's what I can say is we've expressed. We continue to
where
express. I don't know whether we're closer or not. Here's what I can say is we continue to express to the Senate that we are open to a conversation if they want to bring something to the table. We would love to see what that is, even if I don't even know what that would look like. But we would just love to see something that we can kind of work from as a baseline, and that's pretty much where we are at this point.
Where are House Republicans on the abortion bill? Is that something that is still likely to come to the floor this session?
Yeah, so that I would, as of right now, I would have an expectation that we would see that bill move through committee and then come to the floor. That's as of today, but we obviously would need to get through the steps before I could give you certainty on whether that would happen.
Are there any concerns on how it's currently written, or is everyone kind of okay?
I would have to look. I'd have to ask that question again of the floor manager. My understanding was there wasn't, but I want to clarify that before I give you a firm answer.
There was an amendment filed to that bill. Representative Deacon had an amendment that would be basically a personhood language, total abortion ban. It seemed like maybe your caucus wasn't eager to vote on an amendment like that. The Democrats would be happy to vote on it. I mean, what is your feeling? Would you still be willing to bring the bill to the floor even if that amendment were attached?
That's a conversation we'll have to have as a caucus. I would expect it probably would be one of the decisions we would have to make on how we would handle that amendment before we would move forward. So if it were to move forward, I assume that's something we'll have to have a discussion as a caucus to see how we would like to handle that as part of this.
For the past 2 years, the Chief Justice has been proposing this magistrate change. It didn't get any traction before. What changed this year? Did it just take a long time for you guys to figure it out, or was she successful in lobbying, or is it because of the budget savings that will be achieved through it? What was the turning point?
Well, I think it speaks to how, as a government, we need to continue to look for efficiencies. I think that the Chief Justice last session, one of the pieces of feedback that we gave is not that it came out of nowhere, because I don't want to accuse her of just springing something on us, but I don't know if the legwork had taken place to make sure that the table was set with the legislature. We recognize that there probably are some areas in the state in which we're not getting maximum efficiency out of our magistrate system. So I would just say the Chief Justice has put a lot of time in since early last session when she kind of brought that topic to us to get us to the point where we are. And so I would say some of that is just the legislative process worked itself out. I always tell everybody not every bill passes the first time it's introduced, and the Chief Justice took that very seriously, and she put in a lot of effort to get to where we are now.
You have primaries coming up. Some of your members have primary elections that they will face. We're into April, where it's like
April
we're like 3
21st.
weeks away.
Well, clearly he's not counting, so yeah, go ahead.
How do you balance trying to get the things done here that you want to do with the desire to get folks back home to the district so they can compete for voters?
Yeah. So the decision we've kind of reached as a caucus is when there is work for us to do to be here, we're obviously going to be here and do that work. And our members recognize, that just comes, that's one of the challenges of being a legislator. It's not just balancing elections, but your home life and everything else that comes with it. So that's something that each of those individuals will have to balance. We've been very clear with the caucus, when there's work for us to do, we need to be here. If there's not, we're not going to bring everybody together just to sit and stare at each other. So some of that is going to be at an individual level, how the members decide that they want to handle it. But I know a lot of them are working extremely hard when they're not here in preparation. Not that they haven't been the whole time, but now that there is the final filings happening, they're putting that hard work and getting their campaigns ramped up.
Should we
Last one.
infer from what you just said there that that's a little foreshadowing that you will not be adjourning by the 21st?
Oh, you think I'm ever going to fall into that trap of answering that question? I've gone this long without ever answering the question. I will just say I think next week you're going to start seeing progress start happening around this building on things that are important for us to be able to get adjourned. But as far as the specific date, you'll probably never pin me down to answering that
You
question.
start planning it?
Nope, and got almost half the anhydrous is on, so hopefully my dad's doing a good job while I'm here. So thanks everybody.